Namo Buddhaya, Namo Amitabhaya. Today I feel like talking about what exactly caused reincarnation. So some other religion may also talk about reincarnation, but they may not give the detail like exactly what caused reincarnation. In Buddhism, the Buddha explained clearly the cause of samsara, the cause of reincarnation. So that is the 12 links of dependent origination. Dependent origination or dependent arising is an extremely important concept in Buddhism. So it's not just a concept, but it's really the truth. It's really like that. In Buddhism, we don't say that there is an absolute creator that creates everything and that's it. Instead, the Buddha explains that everything in our lives happens because of something else. Because this exists, so that exists. It's dependent on something else. So nothing really exists independently. I do not exist independently. I'm here also because of my parents. All these causes and conditions, links of dependent origination explains the cause of samsara. So remember the wheel of life that we discussed before. So I've got the famous painting, the wheel of life. You may not be able to see this clearly, but I briefly explain because we also discussed this before. So in the center, we have the three animals, the pig, the bird, and the snake, which represents the three poisons that all of us have, which is ignorance, greed, and anger. Ignorance is actually the cause of samsara. Greed and anger also belongs to ignorance. And then we have this circle is the karma. If you do good deeds, then you go up, you ascend in the cycle of rebirth. If you do bad deeds, then you fall in the cycle of rebirth. And this big circles represents the 6 realms of reincarnation, which we discussed before. The heaven, the human, the asurers, the animal, the hungry ghost, and the hell realm. And the outside circle, I see this, all this outside circle represents what we're going to discuss today, the 12 links of dependent origination. The outside circle explains clearly how samsara works, why reincarnation happens. So today we're going to look at the 12 links of dependent origination. So the first link is ignorance. What caused reincarnation? Due to a sort of ignorance. Ignorant of what? Ignorant of, for instance, the Four Noble Truths. One doesn't understand that there is sufferings in life. The cause of suffering stems from our craving, and there is the cessation of suffering and the path that leads to the end of suffering. So ignorance of the Four Noble Truths, ignorance of the law of karma, the law of cause and effect, ignorance of mistakenly perceiving the 5 skandhas as the self. So the 5 skandhas are the form, this physical body, the feelings, the perceptions, the mental activities, and the consciousness to discern. So a lot of people identify these 5 skandhas as the self, but this is actually not the true self. Why they're not the true self? Because they're all impermanent, constantly changing. We talked about before, what's real in Buddhism has to be unchanged throughout time. So because of this ignorance, hence it creates the samsara, the 6 realms of reincarnation. So the ignorance that we discuss here is actually the more heavy ignorance which caused samsara. There is also the more subtle ignorance even the arahants have, even the bodhisattvas have, which prevent them from realizing the perfect Buddhahood. So only when one ends fundamental ignorance, one can realize Buddhahood. So fundamental ignorance, also called beginningless ignorance, is the very first thought of ignorance. And through the fundamental ignorance that give rise to more heavy ignorance, which caused the samsara. So arahants ends the heavy ignorance. The arahants ends all the afflictions of wrong views and perceptions. But they still have the afflictions of dust. They still have the affliction of ignorance. Even bodhisattvas still have the most subtle ignorance, which prevent them from realizing the perfect Buddhahood. So the ignorance here we discuss is the more heavy ignorance in the samsara, also known as the ignorance of the branches. But this is also stemmed from the fundamental ignorance, the beginningless ignorance, the very first thought of ignorance. And when one eliminates the fundamental ignorance, one can realize Buddhahood. When one eliminates the heavy ignorance, one can end the cycle of reincarnation. So ignorance in the painting of the Wheel of Life is usually represented by a blind man looking for his way with his crane. So we are like this blind person because of ignorance. Because there is ignorance, so there is the second component in the 12 links of dependent origination, that is karmic formation or mental formation. So what does that mean? What's karma? We discussed before. Karma stands for our thoughts. Karma is our intention, our thoughts that act through the mind, body, and speech. We don't just have one thought, right? We don't just have one intention, but really a series of thoughts, series of intention that acts through the body, speech, or mind, right? With series of speech, series of actions, right? So it's the karmic formation, right? Because of our karma that formed from our past lives, right? This karmic formation also determines our next rebirth. So that's why we are being born with all kinds of situations, in all kinds of families. This also depends on our karma from our past lives. So all the karmic formations from our past lives determine our rebirth in this life. It can even affect our future lives. So this is usually represented by a potter making a vase on a wheel. So the pots the potter makes symbolize the actions of body, speech, and mind, by which the potter moves his karma in the wheel of life. So this is actually a very good metaphor, because you think about the wheel, that the potter is making the pots on the wheel. Only a single push, then this wheel can turn automatically, for those who have made pots before. So it's like our karmic imprints from our past life really affects our life in this life. That's why it's so difficult sometimes for us to change our habits or to let go of our attachment, because the karmic force is very strong and it doesn't just form in this life. We carry this habit from our past lives because of our karma. So although sometimes we think we have the choice, sometimes we can't really help because the karmic force is very strong. The habitual tendency is very strong. Because of our karma, because of our karmic formation, then it gives rise to the third component in the 12 links of dependent origination, that is the consciousness. Because of our karmic formation, so the consciousness will come to reincarnate. And the consciousness here we're talking about is the alaya consciousness, storehouse consciousness, the eighth consciousness we discussed, that stores all our karmic formation, all the karmic imprints from our past lives. So it's the consciousness that comes to reincarnate, to enter into the mother's womb. Then slowly it gives rise to the physical body due to all kinds of causes and conditions. So there's a sutra called Entry into the Womb. In this sutra, the Buddha described how the consciousness enter into the mother's womb. So we don't reincarnate into our mother's womb by chance, but really it's because of our karma with our parents as well. Usually 4 types of reasons why we reincarnate into a particular family, either to pay debt or to collect debt, to pay gratitude or to take revenge. It can be a mix of these reasons as well. So it's because of our karmic connection with our parents, so we chose this family to reincarnate into a certain family. So this consciousness is usually represented by a monkey swinging on the trees in the wheel of life, because our delusional mind is very strong, just like a monkey likes to jump from trees to trees. And the 4th component in the 12 links of dependent origination is called the name and form. So what does it mean? So because of consciousness, the consciousness is linked to your womb, and then there is the embryo. The embryo is the form. And what is name? Name here refers to the psyche, the mental phenomena, the 4 skandhas. So that's the feelings, perceptions, mental activities, and the consciousness to discern. So although it's only an embryo, it already has all this mental phenomena. So the embryo also think and feels as well. So that's why in Buddhism we do not support abortion. It doesn't matter which stage of the pregnancy, because first of all, the consciousness is already there, from the formless to the form. So to abort, it doesn't matter which stage, it's considered an act of killing. You actually try to kill the consciousness that has strong karmic connection with you, which chose to enter into your womb. So it's better that if one can refrain from abortion. In some cases, maybe we cannot afford raising children, etc. What to do? Maybe to give to families that cannot have children. There are also many families in the world that they want to have children, they cannot have children. So the 4th component is called the name and form. It actually refers to the 5 skandhas, but because the form here doesn't look like a human's body yet, and also the name, the feelings, perceptions, these are not completely developed, but it already has in there. So that's why it's called the name and form. In the wheel of life, it's represented by a person in a boat. So the boat symbolizes the form, and the person symbolizes the psyche, the mental phenomena. And next are the 6 roots. Because there is the name and form, then slowly, during the period of pregnancy, and then they developed the 6 roots. So before we talk about the name and form, the form that did not look like a human's baby yet, maybe 2 to 3 weeks into pregnancy, there are no 6 roots yet. But after 19 weeks, about 5 months, then we can see all the 6 roots are formed. If you go to an ultrasound during pregnancy, you can see the baby's eyes, nose, mouth, ears, etc. All these 6 sense bases, they have been formed. And in the wheel of life, this is usually represented by an empty house with an empty door. So this is because the sense bases have been formed but not yet functioning. So this is also the pregnancy stage. If you read the Sutra on Entry into the Womb, the Buddha describes this stage in great details, not only the physical development but also the mental, in extremely great detail. Really incredible. This is also one of my favorite sutras, and I highly recommend all of you to go and read about it to understand how we actually came from the consciousness and into our mother's womb and into this world. And the 5th component is contact. This is when the moment that we are being born from our mother's womb, that is the first contact we have with the external world, with our 6 sense bases. And we know that when the baby first came out from the womb, the baby usually, almost all babies in the world, would cry hysterically. Why is that? Because it went through great suffering, like coming out from that tiny little hole, and also a great suffering for him at a delicate skin to come into contact with the external environment. So the Buddha also describes this in the sutra. So in the wheel of life, contact is usually represented by an image where a woman touches a man. So once we have contact, then there is the feelings of good, bad, neutral, right? So this is usually represented by an arrow struck into a man's eyes in the wheel of life. This just shows us how much we are controlled by our feelings in each and every moment, how much we are being controlled by our likes and dislikes, our preferences, our separation, our attachment to the feelings in each and every moment. It's really like an arrow struck into our eyes. So because we have feelings, then it gives rise to craving. If it feels good, then we crave for more. We do not want to separate from the object that we like, and we want to be separated from the sensations, the feelings that we dislike. So because there's feelings, then it gives rise to craving. And remember in the Four Noble Truths, craving is the root of suffering. That's why we suffer so much in our life due to our craving, our attachment to not to get what we want. So this is usually represented by a man drinking the wine, or a woman offering wine to the man. Good wine, and you crave for more. So, and because of craving, there is grasping. You want to obtain more. You want to obtain the things that you like, whether in relationship, in our everyday life. We all see that feelings, craving, and grasping. This is very logical. So this is usually represented by a man plucking fruit from the trees, because it's so good. So you want to get it. You want to have more. Because of grasping, then one acts through one's body, speech, and mind, and there is becoming. This is usually represented by a couple making love. Because there is becoming, so one is reborn in a particular birthplace when all the necessary conditions are there. So this is represented by a woman giving birth in the wheel of life. So there's the rebirth. Because there is birth, there is again the old age and death, and all kinds of sufferings in between. So this is represented by a burials with a corpse in the wheel of life. So these are the 12 links of dependent origination, the 12 causal links that clearly explain how reincarnation came into place, what caused reincarnation. So how to eliminate samsara? It's easy. If the ignorance is eliminated, then samsara is eliminated, because it stems from ignorance. Although it's easy in theory, it's extremely difficult to do in practice. We talked about before, only an arahant can end samsara. So an arahant cut off all the attachment in the cycle of reincarnation. The arahant cut off all the wrong views and perceptions, and hence one can end the cycle of birth and death. It's easier said than done, right? Can we actually let go of all the attachment in the cycle of reincarnation? Can we actually just even let go of the attachment to this physical body? It's extremely difficult, almost impossible for maybe almost all the people here in the world. So what to do? The easiest way to exit the cycle of reincarnation is to recite the name of Amitabha Buddha or Amyotofo, to rely on Amitabha Buddha's great compassionate vows to receive us to his pure land. and there we can realize Buddhahood quickly. When we arrive in the Pure Land, we are outside of the cycle of reincarnation. So this is the easiest way. If you were to rely on your self-effort to cut off all your attachment and all the afflictions, it's extremely difficult, near impossible for beings in the Dharma ending age. Actually, the Buddha already said it's not possible for beings in the Dharma ending age. That's why we must rely on Amitabha Buddha's great compassionate vows to first migrate our consciousness to the Pure Land, and there we can realize Buddhahood quickly, because Amitabha Buddha has the great compassionate vows to receive us to the Pure Land without the need for us to first realize enlightenment. So the Pure Land path is also the easy path. It's the path that is the most suitable for all the beings in the Dharma ending age. So before we discuss about Pratyeka Buddha, also known as alone Buddha, so a Pratyeka Buddha realized enlightenment by either independently observing the 12 causal links. So maybe when there is no Buddha in the world and he can independently observe the 12 links of dependent origination, or when he was born during the time of the Buddha and he heard the Buddha expounding the Dharma about the 12 links of dependent origination, and he ended the craving and realized enlightenment. But it's very rare to have this kind of person in our world. Maybe in the past there are Pratyeka Buddhas, but now given we are in the Dharma ending age, it's extremely difficult and near impossible. So the easy way is actually for us to recite the name of Amitabha Buddha and to migrate to the Pure Land, and there we can realize Buddhahood quickly. And also, to exit the cycle of reincarnation doesn't mean that we do not exist anywhere. Buddhism is not nihilism. Sometimes people think, oh, what's the point of exit samsara? Then one doesn't exist anywhere. No, it's not like that. You will not be reborn in the cycle of reincarnation, which is actually an illusion. The cycle of reincarnation is an illusion. But you will actually realize your true nature. Your true nature is actually no birth and no death. We actually have eternal life, no birth and no death. We actually don't need to go through this repeated suffering of birth and death. Our true nature is actually no birth and no death, which is eternal. Why we don't use the word eternal? Because when we say eternal, there could be meaning there is a beginning and then eternal. No, our true nature is actually no birth, no death, no beginning, no end. Infinite light and life. That is our true nature. That's also the meaning of Amitofu. And someone may also ask, why do we have ignorance in the first place? Because of ignorance, then there is reincarnation. So why do we have ignorance in the first place if our true nature is actually no birth and no death? Okay, so this we'll discuss in the next video. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Amitabhaya, Namo Amitofu.